So next up, we're going to take a look at the Marvel games from Capcom for the Sega Saturn. We're going to start off with Children of the Atom. Now, I remember this launching in the arcade, and I remember saying to myself, interesting. It's interesting. It's a good idea to play these, to be able to play the Marvel characters. Of course, as I mentioned in my art book video on Marvel vs. Capcom, by '94, I think, when this game hit the arcades, the XMen television series was so popular. But, the art style, they didn't quite nail the art style in this one. I remember in the arcades that this game was a little bit difficult, but on the Saturn, it is insanely difficult. It feels unbalanced. It feels like the computer can absolutely destroy you unless you get really cheap to match its cheapness, and then you can kind of win fights pretty easily. So it's a hard one to recommend, but again, as a historical curiosity, I think it's worth having if you can get it in the $20 range. Next up, Marvel Superheroes, and you can kind of see the evolution here. This game is by no means perfect, but it has better graphics, truer to that early 90s Marvel art style. It plays better. It has some kind of more popular Marvel characters like Hulk and Spider-Man and Iron Man and things like that. It does have that gem power-up system, which I really don't like, and it takes advantage of the 1 megabyte card, supposedly, although I don't really notice much of a difference in the speed of the game. It was the first game to introduce some of the classic musical tracks that became very popular later in the series. So, it's really expensive for the US release, but, as a Japanese import for $20-30, it's better than Children of the Atom by far, but it certainly isn't the cream of the crop. And then, of course, XMen vs. Street Fighter. And this is where that Marvel vs. Capcom style really begins to take off. You have the incredible animation. It's taken advantage of the full 4 megabytes of the expansion card. Plays really, really well. It's still, attached to the Earth style. It's not the later Marvel vs. Capcom, flying all over the screen, aerial combo style, although it introduces some of those mechanics, but it's not the focal point. Great characters, great music. The music in this series is so good. And it's just actually a shame because I think the musical quality, just not the quality of, the actual music as it is written, but the compression or whatever they used, it feels very tinny, almost staticky, so you lose a little bit. But just to hear those great tracks and see the great backgrounds and, having those big, bold sprites that at this point really, really looked like the Marvel or X-Men cartoon. I remember seeing this in the arcade and just being, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that what I was looking at on the arcade screen was what I was watching at home. And, the Saturn captures that beautifully. It has some load times, but once it loads up, it's quick, it's fluid, and it is a terrific game. And lastly, the high point on the Saturn for Marvel vs. Capcom is, of course, Marvel Superheroes vs. Street Fighter. This is everything. This is the end point of all these other games. Best looking graphics, absolutely insane fast gameplay. Again, it's not going to come through on YouTube how fluid and gorgeous the animation is, but it is top notch on the Saturn. Still has that musical tinniness that I was talking about, but it is a joy to play. I have to say that my favorite character is Ken, and I never liked the fact that the Hurricane Kick actually is an ascending Hurricane Kick in this one. I just never liked those mechanics. I think these games can get so absolutely absurd with the air combos, the speed, the tagging in and out, that, it was at this point that I think it really diverged from Street Fighter. And I didn't always like that, but just to see the Saturn handling these sprites with, almost flawlessly. I say almost flawlessly. There's, just the slightest bit of slowdown when a huge character is on the screen, like the Hulk. Same can be said in X-Men versus Street Fighter for Juggernaut, but this is, I think, Capcom at the height of its aesthetic brilliance. I mean, it's not as good as Alpha 2, but mechanically, but as far as just the fluid animation of the characters, it doesn't get much better on the Saturn than Marvel Superheroes versus Street Fighter.